Good morning to y'all. We want to begin with the latest in the Justice Department investigation into efforts to overturn the 2020 election. 4 people familiar with the matter telling the Washington Post federal prosecutors now have turned their attention to former President Donald Trump. 2 sources telling the Post in recent days, 2 top aides to former Vice President Mike Pence were asked before a grand jury about their conversations with Trump, his lawyers, and others in his inner circle who took part in the scheme to replace certified Biden electors with a slate of the former president's allies. According to the Post, prosecutors have asked hours of detailed questions about meetings Trump led in December 2020 and January 2021, his pressure campaign on Pence to overturn the election, and what instructions Trump gave his lawyers and advisors about fake electors and sending electors back to the states. 2 sources also telling the paper the Justice Department has had it in its possession since April, the phone records of key officials and aides in the Trump administration, including former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. The investigation, the Post reports, is now on 2 tracks. One centered on the charges already filed against those who stormed the Capitol, like seditious conspiracy, and the other track, potential fraud connected to the elector scheme and the pressure Trump put on DOJ officials and others to go along with the big lie. A spokesman for the former president did not immediately respond to the Post's request for comment. A Justice Department spokesman and a lawyer for Mark Meadows also both declined to comment. NBC News has not yet been able to independently confirm the new details in the Post's reporting. But Attorney General Garland did sit down for that interview with Lester Holt and had an exchange on whether the Justice Department would indict the former president if the evidence supported it.
You said in no uncertain terms the other day that no one is above the law.
Yeah.
That said, the indictment of a former president, of perhaps candidate for president, would arguably tear the country apart. Is that your concern as you make your decision down the road here? Do you have to think about things like that?
Look, we pursue justice without fear or favor. We intend to hold everyone, anyone who was criminally responsible for the events surrounding January 6th, for any attempt to interfere with the lawful transfer of power from one administration to another, accountable. That's what we do. We don't pay any attention to other issues with respect to that.
So if Donald Trump were to become a candidate for president again, that would not change your schedule or how you move forward or don't move forward?
Say again that we will hold accountable anyone who was criminally responsible for attempting to interfere with the legitimate, lawful transfer of power from one administration to the next.
To include a former president, he said. Let's bring in congressional investigations reporter for the Washington Post, Jackie Alamany. She contributed to that new report on the Justice Department probing Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Jackie, good morning. It's good to see you. So this is what many people suspected, that the Justice Department was looking at former President Trump, but now you all at the Post have confirmed that with a bunch of sources. Based, it sounds like, on the kinds of questions that are being asked of people like Mark Short and other witnesses who have come in to talk about the events around January 6th, focused on Donald Trump.
That's exactly right, Willie. We've reported that prosecutors who have recently brought in people like Greg Jacobs and Mark Short and potentially more. We just, people we might not be aware of just yet, but people who were very close to Mike Pence had firsthand accounts and were witness to the pressure campaign being applied on him to overturn the results of the election. And we're also in the room for other meetings involving some of the constitutional schemes being put forth by Trump allies, people like John Eastman. Before the president, they were asked about those interactions. They were asked about meetings in December of 2021 and January of 2020, December of 2020 and January of 2021. We also know that they were asked specifically about the pressure being put on Mike Pence, according to sources. And we also know that these phone records that have been newly reported and obtained by the Justice Department included phone records from top Trump aides and Mark Meadows as well, someone else who was also in the room for a lot of these really explosive and meetings that have recently garnered a lot of scrutiny by the January 6th committee, particularly that December 19th committee that preceded the things will be wild tweet, along with the meetings that occurred in the lead up to January 6th, that week before January 6th, with John Eastman, who was specifically advocating and pressuring Mike Pence to go along with his constitutional planning.
And Jackie, your reporting at the Post dovetails on the same day with the interview Lester did with Merrick Garland, because Merrick Garland did say, as we just heard, the Attorney General, that we will, without fear or favor, go after anyone who participated in this effort to overturn the election. When Lester pressed him, does that mean Donald Trump? Attorney General Garland said, as I said, anyone who participated in this without fear or favor. So does that confirm essentially for you what you all are reporting, that, yes, the Justice Department is looking at Donald Trump?
Yes, exactly. That does help provide some additional corroboration on top of the sources that we've already spoken with. But we know that the Justice Department is now squarely focused on Trump, along with his top allies who were involved with some of these plans, including, as I did not mention previously, but this fake slate of electors plan in particular. We also know that these people have been asked before the grand jury about those plans as well and their conversations with Trump campaign officials. But there has been increasing pressure on Merrick Garland, especially after this 8th hearing held by the January 6th committee that really laid out how responsible and directly involved the former president was in most of these conversations and the decision making with regards to the insurrection to go harder on the former president. And now we're seeing Merrick Garland, who has taken this bottom-up approach for the past year and a half, now finally move his way up towards the top fish here.
Jackie, there was an interesting bit in the Lester Holt interview with Merrick Garland where the Attorney General says that it's inevitable that the committee will have found things before we found them, and it's inevitable that there will be things that we find that they haven't found. What is it? Do you think there's some reference there to what the DOJ may have found that perhaps the committee hasn't?
Yeah, that is a really great question, Katie. Because I was actually wondering, this is, and I think, an important question potentially, why the grand jury brought forth Mark Short and Greg Jacobs after they appeared for multiple private depositions and Greg Jacobs appeared publicly, why they'd want to add more transcripts onto the pile for this grand jury to review. And it might be the case that there is a new line of inquiry potentially that the January 6th committee had not asked about, that they wanted to get on the record from Mark Short and Greg Jacobs. There's also just this idea that there is a higher bar for the Department of Justice. They are held to the law. They are potentially pursuing criminal charges here. That is a bar that the January 6th committee is not held to. They are working in the court of public opinion. And so that question as well, they have, the Department of Justice has some other powers potentially, and potentially has had more cooperation from witnesses under more criminal potential criminal prosecution, and might have provided more information. They also have been able to provide and obtain more documents under secrecy through subpoenas, getting things like these phone records, things that the committee could obtain but are more politically problematic for them.